Hey guys, this is Austin. Today, Apple announced 3 brand new iPhones, and they range from kind of expensive to very expensive to are you serious? So the main announcement today was the iPhone XS. And yes, even though it is spelled XS, it is pronounced iPhone XS because Apple likes confusing names. Although to be fair, the S model has been around forever. What you're getting here is a phone that is very, very similar to the current iPhone X. Now besides a new gold color option, the actual physical dimensions and the look of the phone are almost identical. Now there are some physical differences, including the most durable glass ever on a smartphone, because we've heard that one like every time anyone launches a phone. And on top of that, there's also going to be some slightly better water resistance. It's now going to be IP68 rated, which basically means they can be underwater for slightly longer. Actually, I think specifically IP68 is 2 meters instead of 1 meter, right?
2 meters, 30 minutes.
2 meters, 30 minutes. Not a massive difference. Other minor updates include a little bit more dynamic range with the display and better stereo separation with the speakers. Now, one thing that a lot of people brought up during the keynote, although I think they slightly misunderstood it, was the 120 Hz touch sensitivity. Now, it's not going to be like the iPad Pro, a 120 Hz display. What it is going to do is look for your actual touches 120 times a second. Surprising no one, Touch ID is nowhere to be found. Instead, we do have a slightly tweaked version of Face ID on the new phone. Now, what you're getting here is going to be basically the same hardware of the old Face ID, but it does have a better algorithm as well as faster, secure enclave processing to be able to supposedly get you a little bit of a quicker scan of your face and to be a little bit more accurate when doing so. One of the biggest upgrades is with the processor. Now, I will absolutely give credit where credit is due. Apple completely kills it when it comes to developing their own custom processors, and the A12 Bionic is no exception. So first of all, this is going to be the very first chip shipping on a 7nm process. So it is assumed that's going to be the TSMC process, which means that not only is this going to be cutting edge, it's going to give you better performance, better battery life, all that kind of fun stuff. But importantly, it's going to allow them to put a lot of really high-tech stuff on a single chip. It's got 6.9 billion transistors. That might not really mean anything to you, but that's a lot, especially for a phone. Now, the general layout of the chip is very similar to the last generation. We still do have a 6-core CPU design, so 2 of those cores are going to be high performance, and they're going to be a little bit faster, but most importantly, more efficient. And the 4 low power cores that back them up are going to be about the same performance, but consume around 50% less power. On top of that, Apple is also introducing their new GPU. So last year was the very first time that Apple had completely developed their own GPU in-house, and now there's going to be a 2nd generation version of that, which supposedly, again, all these numbers are with a grain of salt, are going to be about 50% faster than the previous generation. Now, a specific part of the chip called the neural engine was introduced last year with the A11 Bionic, and here on the A12, it is a lot faster. Previously, it was able to do somewhere in the neighborhood of around 600 billion operations per second, but now it can do almost an order of magnitude faster at 5 trillion. Camera-wise, the XS does have a slightly updated sensor, so the main wide-angle camera is, quote, slightly larger as far as sensor size goes. Now that is a good thing. That's actually one of the main advantages of a lot of the Samsung Galaxy phones, is that for a while they've actually had bigger sensors than pretty much anyone else in the smartphone space. So having a little bit of a bigger sensor and hopefully better glass to cover it is a good thing. Now it's still going to be 12 megapixels, and the telephoto camera, from the sound of it, actually hasn't been updated, but with that A12 Bionic chip on board, the processing is all going to be a lot better, and there are some legitimately new features there. One of the new features is Smart HDR. Now HDR has been around on iPhones for quite a while, and what it traditionally will do is take multiple photos and then take a higher exposure, low exposure, and just merge it in to be able to get as much dynamic range as possible. But Smart HDR takes a page out of the Pixel 2's playbook by taking individual frames in between the HDR shots. Speaking of other features that are brand new, even though they've been on other Android phones for quite a while, we have an updated portrait mode. So right now, if you take a portrait photo on, say, an iPhone X, essentially what you see is what you get. There's not really going to be any adjustment beyond being able to have the original photo and then the portrait version. But with the XS, you can now adjust the level of simulated depth of field. This is almost identical to what you were able to get on quite a few other phones in the past. Specifically, the Note 8 last year did a really good implementation of being able to really allow you to tweak how that portrait photo looks. Now, I will completely admit that the iPhone does a really good job of sort of cutting people out of the background, and I'm sure the XS is going to be better, but it just kind of bothers me when they're bragging about, oh look, this is revolutionary and brand new, when phones have been doing this for years. But I mean, I guess it's glad that they caught up. And continuing on the train of this should have happened a long time ago, you now do have dual SIM support on the XS and the XS Max, and yeah, I'll get to the Max in a second. So the XS is actually going to do it in a slightly different way, as opposed to having 2 individual SIM cards. Instead, you put a standard SIM card in, and you can also take advantage of an eSIM, which is cool if you're on one of the very few carriers around the world that actually supports this. Now, funnily enough, they actually kind of acknowledged this on stage, and if you actually want to pick up the phone with dual SIM capability in China, it straight up just supports 2 full-size SIMs. So, yeah. Actually, no, it's not full-size SEMs. It's the nano SEMs. It'd be great though if it actually fit the full-size SEM, like the old school one. So the main difference here with the XS Max is just going to be that screen size. So if you want a plus size version of the iPhone X, this is going to be your option. Now, where this is not going to be a great option, and one of my big problems with the phone, besides the fact that it's a kind of boring update, is the price. These are expensive, like really, really expensive. You may have caught a little video I did the other day talking about why I'm not a huge fan of the Galaxy Note 9. A big reason why I'm not excited about it is because I think the value proposition is kind of sketchy. But when you take a look at the XS and the XS Max, oh man, it's a bit of a mess. So to start with the iPhone XS, so again, this is replacing the standard size iPhone X, it is going to be the same price. $1,000 for the 64 gig version of the phone and $1,150 for the 256 gig version. They don't actually sell a 128 anymore, although they haven't done that for a couple years. Now, if you really want to go all out, you can pick up the 512 gigabyte version of the iPhone XS. It's going to cost you $1,350. $1,350, and that's not even the max. So if you step up to the iPhone XS Max, add $100 to all of these prices. It starts at $1,100, and a fully loaded iPhone XS Max is going to cost you $1,450. Look, okay, I get that more expensive phones are becoming common, but I feel like just over a year ago, the most expensive phone you get was maybe $1,000, and that's if you load up all the storage and go completely crazy. But now we've got a mainstream flagship that's costing you nearly $1,500. Excluding special edition phones, which are encrusted with like diamonds or something, the iPhone XS, even in the base model, is going to be the most expensive flagship that you can buy in 2018. And man, I hope it keeps that title for a while, because the days of $1,000 flagships only lasted for so long, and now we're spending $1,100, $1,200, $1,400 on them. Okay, to put this in perspective, you could buy an entire Pocophone F1 for less than the price of just upgrading your storage on the iPhone XS. It's $350 to go from the base to $512. That's so... I'm gonna stop getting fired up about this for 1 second, because there actually is one more iPhone to talk about. The iPhone XR, because that's a name, I guess. What does the R stand for? Does anyone, they didn't say anything about it, right?
Really cool.
The iPhone X really cool? The XR actually slots in size between the XS and the XR, so it's rocking a 6.1 inch display, which unfortunately has a very low resolution of 1792 by 828, or somewhere in the neighborhood of like 80% of a 1080p display. Now, I think the reason they did this is because it is going to be that same pixel density as the standard iPhone 8, and it's going to be a lot cheaper because they've gone from an OLED panel to an LCD, but the screen is probably going to be fine. That's just not a very high resolution for a 6-inch display. One of the disadvantages of using an LCD display, on top of the fact that it's not going to be as sharp or have the same kind of contrast, is that it looks like the iPhone XR might have a slightly larger bezel. Now, of course, it does have the same notch, it does have the same Face ID system, but from the pictures, it's kind of hard to tell. I really want to get my hands on a XR to be able to see exactly how much bigger that bezel is. It doesn't look massive, to be fair, but it does look a little bit bigger than on the XS. So, in order, you can get it in white, black, blue, coral, yellow, and Project Red. And I gotta say that the yellow actually kind of has my name on it, so I appreciate that they're doing some different colors. Besides a slight downgrade in the IP rating, it's going to be IP67 as opposed to 68 on the iPhone XS. The rest of the hardware is going to be very similar. You're going to be getting that same Apple A12 Bionic chip, and you're going to be getting the same main camera. So you don't get the telephoto option of the XS and the XS Max, but you are going to be getting that same main wide-angle camera with the upgraded sensor. And on top of that, you are going to be getting portrait mode on a single camera. So we've seen this on the Pixel 2. It absolutely blew away almost all portrait modes, even with a single camera last year. So it makes sense that Apple is going to be able to include this in the XR. The main thing going for the XR is price. So as opposed to starting at $1,000 like the iPhone X and the XS, it's going to start at $750, pretty much exactly what the iPhone 8 did before. On top of that, we didn't see any updates for any of the other iPhones, most specifically the iPhone SE. I would have really liked to see an updated version of the iPhone SE, is because now the smallest iPhone that you can buy that's actually updated with the 2018 specs is going to have a 5.8-inch display. If you want a smaller phone, well, buy something old, because Apple's not going to hook you up with anything else besides that. So I'm very curious, what do you guys think about the iPhone XS, XS Max, and XR? As always, we'll definitely be getting them in the office for a full video very soon. The XS actually is going to be coming out next week, but let me know. Meanwhile, I'm just going to go be an Apple sheep, or whatever it is that I'm supposed to be today.